In the middle of the steam, the billionaire stood shirtless, his eyes burning with secrets. When she walked in with the towel in her hand, she never knew one step would change everything. A forbidden spark, a dangerous closeness, and a love that refuses to be hidden. Watch till the end, because this story will keep your heart racing. Charlie's mansion stood tall on the hill, shining with beauty and wealth. Yet inside it felt like a silent cage. Every step he took echoed through endless halls, reminding him that he was alone in a house made for many. The chandeliers sparkled as if mocking him, throwing light over marble floors that never felt the warmth of family footsteps. He had designed every room with perfection, but none of them carried laughter or love. At 37, Charlie was admired by the world for his power and fortune. People called him brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. But when the doors of his mansion closed each night, all that remained was silence pressing on his chest. He had forgotten what it felt like to hear someone call his name with love, not obligation. He had forgotten the comfort of a touch that wasn't about money or greed. He would often sit in his vast living room, staring out the tall glass windows. The city lights glittered below, scattered like jewels across the night. Each light represented someone's home, someone's family sharing a meal, someone's laughter echoing in a small living room. And yet his mansion stood in cold stillness, empty of voices, empty of heart. There were nights he wandered to the grand piano and let his fingers move over the keys. The notes filled the mansion, but music could not erase loneliness. Sometimes he stopped halfway through a song because the silence that followed felt heavier than the music itself. Charlie had wealth, cars, art, rare wines, and everything most men only dreamed of. But not one of those treasures could sit across from him at dinner and smile. Not one could hold his hand when the nights felt too long. And then came the evening that shifted everything. His cousin's friend Arabella arrived at the mansion to help prepare for an upcoming event. She was only 25, younger than him by 12 years, yet her presence carried a quiet grace that stilled the air around her. From the first moment he saw her, something unsettled in his chest. She wasn't like the others who stepped into his life. She didn't drown in greed, didn't chase his wealth with desperate eyes. Instead, she moved with calmness, speaking gently to the staff, thanking them in ways no guest ever did. She smiled, not the fake smile he was used to, but one that touched the heart of those who saw it. Charlie found himself watching her more than he meant to. He noticed the way her hair caught the light when she walked past a window. He noticed the kindness in her voice when she gave instructions, never harsh, always patient. That night, as she walked through the hallways carrying a stack of papers, he realized how different she was from the glittering, shallow women he had once entertained. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't chasing anything. She was simply herself, and that was enough to stir something inside him he thought was long dead. For years, he had built walls so high that no one could reach the man inside. But when Arabella walked through his mansion, those walls trembled. Something about her reminded him of a life he once dreamed of, a life with warmth, a life where love lived, a life where touch was not forgotten. The lonely mansion had been silent for years. But on that evening, with Arabella's gentle presence filling the halls, Charlie felt the faintest whisper of change, a whisper of something he had nearly given up on, hope. That evening, after hours of restless thoughts, Charlie decided to escape into his indoor pool. Swimming had always been his way of silencing the noise in his mind. Stroke after stroke, he let the cold water embrace him, but even as his body moved with precision, his heart remained heavy. No amount of laps could drown the ache of emptiness that clung to him. When he finally stepped out, droplets of water slid down his strong frame. He grabbed a robe, but instead of heading straight to his bedroom, he walked toward his private bathroom. The mansion had dozens of bathrooms, but this one, this particular one, was his sanctuary. It was lined with black marble and soft golden lights, a place where he could shut the world out, and pretend he wasn't a man carrying an empire on his shoulders. He switched on the warm lights, and at once the room seemed to glow softly, steam beginning to gather as the shower came alive. Charlie stepped inside the glass cubicle, letting the hot water cascade down his shoulders and chest. It was a release, a comfort, the only embrace he knew anymore. The heat stung at first, then soothed, as though the water tried to wash away not just chlorine, but the invisible scars of loneliness. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back, and for a moment, he let himself imagine what it would feel like if someone stood beside him. Not as an assistant, not as an admirer, but as someone who loved him. That thought struck harder than the water pounding his skin. His hand pressed against the glass, fingers sliding across the condensation as if reaching for someone who wasn't there. Minutes passed. His mind wandered back to Arabella, her quiet grace, her soft voice when she had thanked the staff earlier. It was strange. He hardly knew her, yet already her presence lingered in his thoughts like a whisper he couldn't silence. He shook his head, almost angry at himself. She was just a guest, just a woman helping with an event. Why was he imagining her in his solitude? When the water began to cool, Charlie finally reached for a towel. His arm brushed the edge of the glass, and that was when he realized he had left it outside. He exhaled sharply, frustrated. For a man who planned everything with precision, he had overlooked the simplest thing. There he stood, water running down his body, trapped between his pride and his need. In that moment, stripped of the image of power, Charlie didn't feel like a billionaire. He didn't feel like the man who could buy anything he wanted. He just felt human, vulnerable, imperfect, and strangely exposed. He thought about walking out dripping wet, but the mansion was too vast, too cold. The towel sat just beyond reach, a small reminder that even men with everything sometimes lacked the most basic thing. He muttered under his breath, cursing his forgetfulness, running his hand through his wet hair. And then, just as he was about to push open the glass door, he heard it, the soft click of the bathroom door. He froze. His breath caught in his throat. No one entered this space without permission. It was his sanctuary, his one private escape from the world. Yet the door had opened. The steam shifted with the air as footsteps entered. His pulse quickened, not with anger, but with something else, an unexpected rush of suspense. Through the haze, he caught the faint outline of a figure. Small, graceful, hesitant. His heart lurched before his mind caught up. It was Arabella. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The sound of water hitting his skin was the only noise in the room, but the silence between them carried more weight than words could ever hold. She stood at the edge of the mist, holding something in her hands, her posture caught between courage and hesitation. Charlie's chest tightened, and he pressed his palm against the glass as if anchoring himself. He should have felt embarrassed, should have sent her away immediately. Yet he didn't. Instead, a strange calm settled over him, mixed with anticipation he couldn't explain. In that moment, the billionaire, stripped of everything, his power, his armor, his loneliness, was simply a man under the shower, facing the woman who had just stepped into his silence. And nothing in his world had ever felt so suspenseful. The soft knock against the heavy bathroom door was almost lost in the hiss of water, but Charlie heard it. His head turned, confused. No one ever entered here. Before he could answer, the handle shifted, and the door opened with a quiet creak. Steam curled outward, spilling into the hall, and through it stepped Arabella. Her hands clutched a fresh towel, neatly folded, as if she'd been carrying something sacred. She hesitated at the doorway, her voice trembling but tender. "Charlie, you left this outside." For a man who was used to staff rushing in and out, obeying without thought, her words carried something different. Concern. She hadn't come because she was ordered. She had come because she noticed his need. Through the fogged glass of the shower, Charlie saw the faint silhouette of her figure. The curve of her shoulders, the soft outline of her hair, the gentleness in the way she stood, everything about her presence unsettled him. His heart, steady as stone in boardrooms, quickened now with a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He pressed his palm against the slick glass, his breath clouding the surface. It wasn't lust that rushed through him. It was something far rarer, something purer. The shock of being seen not as a billionaire, but simply as a man who had forgotten a towel. Arabella stepped closer, her eyes scanning the room nervously, but her courage carried her forward. The steam curled around her as though trying to hide her, yet her figure came into focus the nearer she came. When she reached the edge of the shower, she lifted the towel in both hands. Her fingers brushed the glass for a moment, as though she, too, felt the barrier between them. She opened the door carefully, just enough to extend the towel toward him. Charlie stepped forward, droplets of water sliding down his chest, catching the light as though even the water couldn't let go of him. As he reached for the towel, his fingers grazed hers. That brief touch, warm, alive, hit him harder than any business victory ever had. A shiver ran through him, not from cold, but from the startling realization that he had been starved of touch for too long. His world of contracts, deals, and luxury had never given him this, a simple, selfless moment of kindness. Arabella's eyes lifted to his, and for a heartbeat, the silence between them grew electric. She didn't look away, even though she could have. Her gaze was steady, compassionate, unafraid. Charlie clutched the towel but didn't immediately use it. He stood there, caught between vulnerability and longing, caught between the life he had always known and the one this young woman's presence was reminding him was possible. For years, no one had reached him, not through money, not through power, not through admiration. But Arabella, with nothing more than a towel and trembling courage, had broken through. And in that simple touch, in that fragile moment of connection, the billionaire remembered what it meant to feel alive. Charlie slowly secured the towel around his waist, yet his gaze never wavered from Arabella. Every move he made was deliberate, heavy with the awareness that she was standing there, close enough for him to feel the pull of her presence. The steam still curled around them, wrapping the room in a kind of intimacy that neither had planned, yet neither wanted to break. The air felt heavier than before, as if every breath carried a meaning that words couldn't capture. He should have dismissed her, should have thanked her politely and turned away. That would have been the safe, practiced reaction of the man who never let anyone too close. But Charlie didn't move back. He couldn't. His soul clung to this moment like it had been waiting years for it. Arabella's cheeks warmed, a delicate flush spreading across her skin. She clutched her hands together nervously, but even with her heart racing, she didn't turn her eyes away. There was something brave in the way she stood there, as if she wanted him to see she wasn't afraid of who he was beneath the title, beneath the wealth, beneath the perfection. "You shouldn't be alone so much," she whispered, her voice soft yet steady, carrying more truth than any sentence he had ever heard in a boardroom. "Even strong people need someone sometimes." The words struck him deeper than he expected. They cut through his pride, through the armor he had built with money and power. No one dared to speak to him like that. No one dared to remind him he was human. And yet, she did it with a gentleness that disarmed him completely. Charlie took a slow step forward. Droplets of water still trailed down his shoulders and chest, glistening under the golden light. He was aware of every sound, the faint drip of water from his hair, the soft rhythm of her breathing, the pounding of his own heart that felt far too loud in the silence. For a fleeting second his hand lifted, almost of its own will, reaching toward her face. He wanted to trace the softness of her cheek, to prove to himself that she was real, that this wasn't a dream conjured up by his loneliness. But just before his fingers could touch her, he froze. Fear gripped him, not fear of rejection, but fear of vulnerability. He had built his world on control, on power, on never letting anyone see the cracks. What if she stepped back? What if she looked at him differently once she realized how fragile he truly was beneath the surface? His hand hovered in the space between them, the distance small but aching. He could almost feel the warmth of her skin, even without touching it. For a long, suspended moment, he remained there, caught between desire and restraint. And then he saw it. Her eyes. They softened, not with pity, but with understanding. There was no judgment in her gaze, no hesitation, only quiet acceptance. Her look was a silent promise. She wasn't afraid of his truth, of his brokenness, of his hidden need for something more than riches. She didn't move away. She didn't shield herself. She simply stood still, allowing the moment to stretch between them like an unspoken agreement. Her presence told him everything her lips didn't. I see you. Not the billionaire. Not the untouchable man. You. Charlie lowered his hand slowly, but the connection between them didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, pulling at both of them in a way neither could explain. The tension was no longer just silence. It was possibility, raw and dangerous, trembling with the weight of what could happen if either of them dared to take another step closer. And in that heavy air, in that fragile stillness, Charlie realized he wasn't as alone as he once believed. Charlie stood there, wrapped only in a towel, his breath uneven, his heart pounding louder than the drops of water hitting the tiled floor. The steam curled around him like smoke, blurring the distance between them. His eyes, sharp yet broken, never left Arabella's. She stood still, her chest rising and falling in quick, nervous breaths. Neither spoke. The silence was louder than words. He wanted to reach out, but his hand trembled. For years, he had built walls higher than mountains, walls no one had dared to climb. But tonight, under the soft haze of steam, those walls began to crack. Arabella's presence made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Seen. Truly painfully, beautifully seen. His fingers twitched at his side. One step forward, then another. The air grew heavier, charged with something invisible yet undeniable. Her eyes softened, inviting him, daring him. Still, fear lingered in his chest, fear that if he touched her, she would disappear. But Arabella didn't move. She didn't retreat. She didn't shield herself with fear the way others always had. Instead, she looked at him as though he was more than money, more than status, more than scars. She looked at him like he was human. Finally, he gave in. His hand rose slowly, hesitantly, as if every inch was a battle. When his fingertips brushed hers, the world seemed to stop breathing. The touch was feather-light, trembling, unsure, but it was real. Arabella's lips parted slightly, but she didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around his just enough to let him know she wanted this. The towel slipped slightly on his shoulder, revealing damp skin that gleamed under the dim light. Her gaze flicked briefly to his chest before meeting his eyes again, and then she moved. Her hand lifted, soft and careful. She placed it gently on his chest, right where his heart raced wildly. The warmth of her palm burned against his skin, searing straight into his soul. Charlie gasped softly, the sound breaking the heavy silence. It was as though no one had touched him there in years. Not just his chest, but his very heart. "I forgot what this feels like," he whispered. His voice cracked, fragile like glass about to shatter. It wasn't just a confession, it was a cry, a plea, a wound bleeding into the air. Arabella's eyes glistened, as if she felt the weight of every unsaid word behind his whisper. Her thumb brushed softly against his skin, soothing him like a lullaby without sound. "Then remember it," she murmured. Her tone was gentle, but it carried strength. Strength that wrapped around him like a shield, a promise. Because you're not made to live without it. His eyes closed briefly, as if memorizing the moment, breathing it into his very soul. Every defense he had built, every mask he had worn, fell away in that instant. It wasn't passion that burned between them. It was healing. A slow, delicate stitching of two broken hearts finding comfort. The bathroom filled with steam became their secret world. Charlie opened his eyes, meeting hers with a rawness he had never shown anyone. There was no billionaire mask here, no cold armor, just a man aching for connection, trembling under the weight of her kindness. Arabella's smile was small, almost shy, yet filled with quiet courage. Her hand didn't move from his chest. Her presence was steady, anchoring him. Charlie's fingers lingered against hers, brushing, tracing, memorizing. It was not wild, not rushed. It was sacred. It was two lonely souls finding each other, not in grand gestures, but in the stillness of a bathroom. The steam wrapped around them, sealing the moment as if the world didn't exist beyond that door. Every breath, every heartbeat, every drop of water became a witness. And for the first time in years, Charlie didn't feel alone. From that night forward, Charlie's life was never the same. The silence that once haunted the vast corridors of his mansion began to soften, replaced by the tender sound of Arabella's footsteps, the gentle hum of her voice, and the warmth of her laughter. Each morning, he woke no longer to the emptiness of wealth, but to the quiet comfort of knowing someone cared enough to stay. His days, once mechanical and suffocating, now carried meaning, wrapped in the simplicity of shared moments that money could never buy. There were nights when Charlie would simply sit beside her, watching her smile over a cup of tea, and his chest would tighten in a way that no business victory had ever made him feel. He realized that the most priceless things in life weren't things at all, they were moments, fleeting but eternal when shared with the right soul. The grand chandeliers, the marble floors, the fleet of cars, all faded into background noise, because the sound of Arabella whispering his name was more valuable than every possession he owned. Charlie had once believed his empire was his shield, that the billions in his accounts would protect him from pain, rejection, and loneliness. But Arabella's touch dismantled those walls effortlessly, proving that love was the only true shelter a soul could find. She saw him not as the billionaire everyone else bowed to, but as the man who longed to be understood. And in her eyes, for the first time, Charlie felt seen, truly seen. Arabella, too, found herself transformed. She had entered his world with hesitation, unsure if her honesty could survive in the glow of his wealth. Yet with every day, she realized that her truth was exactly what Charlie craved. She taught him that it wasn't weakness to admit. You needed someone. It was the bravest kind of strength, and he taught her that even the most guarded hearts could be softened with love. Their bond grew deeper with each passing season. Winter evenings turned warmer when they sat by the fireplace, not speaking much, because sometimes silence shared in love spoke louder than any words. Spring mornings felt brighter when Arabella opened the curtains and light flooded into his world, chasing away the shadows he had lived with for years. Summer nights shimmered when they walked through the garden, hand in hand, whispering dreams instead of numbers and business plans. And autumn carried a peace that told them both they were no longer alone in the world. Charlie discovered a truth. He had once mocked, the greatest wealth is not measured in millions, but in human connection. A child's laughter, a partner's embrace, a friend's loyalty. These were the treasures no fortune could purchase. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of losing money, because he had finally gained something priceless. The story of their love became a quiet reminder to everyone who heard it. Society often bows to power, admires wealth, and chases status, forgetting that behind every powerful face lies a soul aching for something far simpler. We forget that the strongest hearts still long for tenderness, and that the richest lives are those filled with kindness. Charlie, the man who once believed he owned the world, now knew the truth. The world meant nothing without someone to share it with. He no longer measured his success in contracts or figures, but in the warmth of Arabella's hand in his. The loneliness that had once echoed through his mansion had been silenced forever, not by money, but by love. And so, the billionaire who had forgotten what touch felt like found it again in the gentle hand of the woman who cared enough to offer him a towel. What began as a simple act of kindness blossomed into the greatest love he had ever known. Their story left a lesson for every heart willing to listen. True connection is never found in wealth or power, but in the courage to give love and accept it in return.